She threw her napkin on the table. The app matched me with a mechanic? Or did they think I needed comedy? Ryan said nothing, just looked out at the rain beyond the glass windows, light reflecting in his calm eyes. You're not going to say anything? Or are you waiting for me to pay? She laughed mockingly. He stood up, his voice gentle. No, I'm just waiting for this storm to pass. Outside, rain poured, lightning struck a power line. An explosion rang out, flames bursting against the glass. She screamed. The restaurant descended into chaos. Fire spread quickly. Ryan ran through the smoke and pulled her from the flames. She looked up, breathing hard. Why did you save me? He said softly, because someone still believes every person deserves to be saved. Ryan Cooper was 39 years old, a former aerospace engineer who had served in the Navy before becoming a mechanic. He raised his 8-year-old daughter Emma, gentle and smart, who loved drawing airplanes. Their life was peaceful. Morning pancakes, evening comic books, in a small apartment on the outskirts of Chicago. Ryan had lost his wife in a test flight accident. Since then, he'd closed his heart, focusing only on Emma. Friends pressured him to try dating through an app. At least let Emma see that Dad can still smile. He reluctantly agreed. The woman who appeared that evening was Clara Monroe, 33 years old, CEO of Aerotech, an aerospace technology corporation. The moment she saw his oil-stained hands, she smirked. This app needs better filters. Dinner proceeded in silence. Ryan spoke little. When she asked about his work, he replied, I fix things people throw away. She laughed. I'm used to creating things other people can't have. The storm approached, lightning flashing through the windows. She said, Tonight is terrible. He replied, Not so terrible. At least we're alive. The words made her pause slightly, but she turned away. When he left, she sighed, not knowing that in a few hours their lives would intersect again. Not at a dinner table, but amid smoke and flames. Ryan had debated canceling the date 3 times that afternoon. Emma had caught him staring at his phone, anxious about the whole thing. Dad, you have to go, she'd said with the confident wisdom of an 8-year-old. Mom would want you to be happy. So he'd put on a clean shirt, left Emma with the neighbor, and driven to the upscale restaurant Clara had chosen. A place where he clearly didn't belong, based on the host's barely concealed disdain when he arrived. Clara had been late, sweeping in 20 minutes after their scheduled meeting time without apology. She'd assessed him in 3 seconds, her expression shifting from hopeful to disappointed to barely tolerant. The entire evening had been an exercise in humiliation. Her snide comments about his profession, his clothes, his car that he'd mentioned in passing. Every sentence dripped with the assumption that she was doing him a favor by being there. Ryan had endured it quietly, not because he lacked the words to defend himself, but because he'd learned long ago that some people couldn't see value in anything that didn't match their narrow definition of success. He'd been about to excuse himself politely when the storm hit. The restaurant's old electrical system, already strained by the weather, finally gave out with spectacular and deadly results. The explosion happened so fast most people didn't have time to react. But Ryan's Navy training kicked in automatically. Assess, locate exits, identify threats, protect civilians. He saw Clara frozen in shock, saw the fire spreading toward her table, saw the ceiling beam beginning to crack. He moved without thinking, the way he'd been trained, the way Sarah would have wanted him to, saving a life even when that life had spent the evening treating him like he was beneath her. Because that's what good people did. They saved lives. All lives, even the ones that didn't deserve it. As he carried Clara's unconscious form through the smoke, past panicking diners and collapsing furniture, Ryan wondered if she would even remember that the mechanic she'd mocked had been the one to pull her from the flames. The burned corner of her napkin, still clutched in his hand when the paramedics arrived, would be the only evidence of how close she'd come to dying. After the restaurant explosion, Clara suffered minor burns and was in shock. Police questioned witnesses. Ryan stood at a distance, his shirt burned, refusing medical attention. When Clara woke up in the hospital, the first person she saw was him. You're still here? You didn't have any family show up. I was just keeping watch. Clara trembled. You really saved me? He cut her off. We all make mistakes, when we don't understand people. From that day, he quietly helped her, bringing medicine, taking care of Emma, and bringing food to the hospital. One morning, Emma brought Clara a drawing. Dad and you in the smoke and fire, but still smiling. Clara laughed, then cried. How do you teach your daughter like this? By showing her that kindness doesn't need conditions. Clara gradually recovered, but Aerotech faced a crisis. Someone had deliberately caused the explosion to seize control of the company. She asked Ryan to review the old designs. He discovered the fuel system had been deliberately tampered with. They began working together during late nights at the workshop. When Emma was asleep, Clara sat nearby and asked, "Are you afraid to love again?" "Yes, because the last time I loved someone who didn't believe I could protect them." The truth was more complicated than that, but Ryan wasn't ready to share the full story yet. Sarah had died because of a design flaw Ryan had flagged but been overruled on. He'd spent years carrying the guilt of not fighting harder, not refusing to sign off on the test flight. Clara, meanwhile, was experiencing something entirely new: humility. For the first time in her adult life, she was completely dependent on someone else. Not just for physical care, as she recovered from her burns, but for emotional support as her carefully constructed world fell apart. Aerotech's board was in chaos. The explosion had killed 3 people and injured 17 others. Insurance companies were circling. Lawyers were preparing lawsuits, and someone within her own company had orchestrated it all to push her out and take over. Ryan's mechanical expertise became invaluable. He could read blueprints the way most people read novels, seeing not just what was there, but what was missing, what had been changed, what didn't make sense. Here, he pointed to a fuel line diagram one night, both of them hunched over documents spread across his workshop table. This modification wasn't in the original specs. Someone added a bypass that would cause pressure to build up under specific conditions. Could it have been an accident? A mistake? Not a chance. This is deliberate sabotage designed to look like a catastrophic failure. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Clara felt sick. Someone in her company, someone she trusted, had murdered 3 people and tried to kill her in the process. Emma wandered out in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Dad, why are you still up?" "Helping Miss Clara with some work, sweetheart. Go back to bed." "Can I show her my new drawing first?" Clara expected another childish sketch. What Emma presented instead was a surprisingly detailed rendering of 2 people emerging from smoke, holding hands with the word "safe" written in careful letters across the top. "You're both safe now," Emma explained. "That's what matters." After Emma went back to bed, Clara stared at the drawing, tears streaming silently down her face. "I was so cruel to you," she whispered. "That night at dinner, I treated you like you were nothing, and you still saved me." "Because you're not nothing," Ryan said simply. "You were scared and defensive and hiding behind arrogance, but you're not nothing. Nobody is." "How can you be so kind after everything I said?" "Because someone taught me that people are doing the best they can with what they know, and that grace isn't something you earn. It's something you give." "Sarah, your wife, she taught you that?" Ryan nodded. "She saw the best in everyone, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. I try to honor that." Clara reached across the table and took his hand, her fingers trembling. "I want to be better. I want to be someone Emma could look up to, someone who deserves your kindness." "You already are," Ryan said. "You just haven't been seeing yourself clearly." Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Clara would come to the workshop after her hospital visits, bringing coffee and pastries. Emma would show her new drawings. Ryan would work on his restorations while Clara reviewed files and tried to piece together who was sabotaging her company. They became a unit, not a romantic couple, not yet, but something deeper than that. A team, a family in formation. Clara learned that Ryan had turned down multiple high-paying engineering positions to stay close to Emma, to have a schedule flexible enough for parent-teacher conferences and sick days and school plays. She learned that every cent he earned went to Emma's education fund and therapy to help her process her mother's death. She learned that this man she dismissed as just a mechanic had more integrity, kindness, and strength than anyone in her executive suite. And slowly, carefully, she began to fall in love with him. Not the desperate, passionate love of youth, but the steady, certain love of someone who'd seen the worst and chosen the best anyway. The drawing Emma made, with its simple message of safety, went into Clara's wallet, a reminder of what mattered. Not corporate profits or social status, but the simple miracle of being alive and choosing to be kind. One night, Clara received an anonymous text. "If you go public with the truth, your daughter will have an accident." She panicked and immediately sought out Ryan. He activated his old military network to investigate. They discovered that Lucas Gray, Aerotech's vice president, was behind the explosion. He was planning a new aircraft demonstration, a type Ryan knew was unsafe. Clara wanted to call the police, but Ryan stopped her. "If you speak out now, they'll destroy the evidence." He suggested sneaking into the testing facility himself to retrieve the data drive. "You don't need to risk your life. If I don't go, who will?" The storm arrived that night. Ryan infiltrated the fuel control area. Security discovered him and gave chase. He triggered the emergency release valve to prevent a larger explosion. When Lucas tried to flee, Clara herself blocked his path. "How many innocent people did you hurt just to keep your position?" she shouted. He raised his gun. Ryan dove in, taking the bullet. Police arrived. Lucas was arrested. Ryan fell, blood spreading across his shirt. He whispered, "I told you, tonight's not so terrible." The infiltration required every skill Ryan had learned in his Navy years. The testing facility was a secured compound with guards, cameras, and biometric locks. Getting in undetected should have been impossible. But Ryan had spent years studying systems, finding weaknesses, understanding how things worked and how they could be bypassed. He'd also called in a favor from an old Navy buddy who worked security at a similar facility, getting detailed intel on standard protocols. He went in during the storm, using the weather as cover. Lightning and thunder masked sounds. The driving rain reduced visibility for cameras. Guards stayed inside rather than patrol in the deluge. He made it to the server room, connected the external drive, and started the download. 5 minutes. That's all he needed. But Lucas had been watching, waiting. Security arrived with 3 minutes left on the transfer. Ryan had to make a choice, run and save himself, or stay and ensure the evidence was secured. Sarah's voice echoed in his memory. Sometimes being a hero means finishing the job, even when it's hard. He stayed. The confrontation in the control room was brief but brutal. Ryan wasn't trying to fight. He was trying to prevent Lucas from destroying the evidence and potentially causing another catastrophic failure that would kill the pilot scheduled for tomorrow's test. When Lucas pulled the gun, Ryan didn't hesitate. Clara was standing right behind him. If Lucas fired and Ryan moved, the bullet would hit her. So he didn't move. He stepped forward instead, putting himself between Clara and the weapon, taking the impact that was meant for her. The irony wasn't lost on him as he fell. The woman who had mocked him for being a simple mechanic was now the person he'd taken a bullet for. The woman who treated him like he was beneath her was the one screaming his name as blood pooled beneath him. "Stay with me," Clara sobbed, pressing her hands against the wound. "Don't you dare die. Not after everything. Not after showing me what really matters." "It's okay," Ryan managed, his voice weak. Has the neighbor. The evidence is secure. You're safe. That's what matters." "No, you matter. You matter more than any of this." Police and paramedics flooded the facility. Lucas was dragged away in handcuffs, still shouting about how he'd been protecting the company from Clara's reckless idealism. In the ambulance, Clara held Ryan's hand, refusing to let go even when the paramedics needed space to work. She made promises through her tears, promises that she'd be better, that she'd honor his sacrifice, that she'd never again measure a person's worth by their job title or social status. Ryan wanted to tell her she didn't need to change, that she was already better than she believed, that he'd seen her transformation over these weeks. But the words wouldn't come. The blood loss was too severe. Consciousness was slipping away. His last thought before darkness took him was of Emma, his brave, wise daughter who'd pushed him to go on that terrible date, who'd drawn pictures of hope and safety, who deserved to have her father come home. Then nothing. Clara sat in the hospital waiting room for 8 hours. Emma was with her, brought by the neighbor after Clara had called, voice breaking, to explain what happened. "He'll be okay," Emma said with certainty that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old. "Dad's really strong, and he has stuff to do still. He promised to finish building my treehouse." "Does he keep his promises?" Clara asked. "Always," Emma replied. "Always, always, always." The doctor emerged at dawn, exhausted but smiling. "He's stable. The bullet missed all the major organs, though he lost a lot of blood. He's going to make it." Clara and Emma hugged, crying with relief. When they finally let her into recovery, Ryan was awake, pale but alert. His first words were predictable. "Emma okay?" "She's fine. She's here. She wants to see you." "And you? Are you okay?" Clara laughed through tears. "You took a bullet for me, and you're asking if I'm okay?" "Yeah, because that's what you do for people you—" He trailed off, suddenly uncertain. "For people you what?" Clara pressed gently. "For people you care about," he finished quietly. She took his hand, careful of the IV lines. "I care about you too, more than I knew it was possible to care about someone that I met a few weeks ago. More than makes any logical sense." "Love rarely makes logical sense," Ryan observed. "Is that what this is? Love?" "I think it might be, if you're okay with loving a mechanic who takes bullets and makes terrible life choices. I think," Clara said, leaning close, "that I'm okay with loving a hero who sees value in everyone, even arrogant CEOs who don't deserve his kindness." "Everyone deserves kindness," Ryan replied. "That's the whole point." And in that hospital room with Emma asleep in the chair and dawn breaking through the windows, they understood that sometimes the worst dates lead to the best love stories. Ryan survived the surgery. Clara kept vigil, holding his hand for 3 days straight. When he woke, she simply said, "You still owe me a real dinner." He replied, "As long as it's not somewhere flammable." Emma brought a new drawing to the workshop. Dad, Miss Clara, in an airplane with the words, "We fixed it." Clara laughed, then cried. Together, they rebuilt a small test aircraft, a safe version Ryan had once dreamed of completing. Aerotech was handed over to government oversight while the Safe Flight Foundation was born, teaching children about mechanics and aviation safety. One afternoon, Clara asked, "Do you think I was arrogant?" "Yes, but I was also silent for too long." The foundation grew quickly. Clara used her business expertise to secure funding and partnerships. Ryan provided the technical knowledge and the heart of the operation. Emma became their unofficial mascot, her drawings decorating every wall. They held workshops for kids from underserved communities, teaching them that aviation wasn't just for the wealthy or the credentialed. It was for anyone willing to learn, to work hard, to believe they could fly. Ryan recovered slowly. The gunshot wound had done more damage than the doctors initially realized, requiring a second surgery and months of physical therapy. Clara was there through all of it, driving him to appointments, helping with exercises, refusing to let him sink into the depression that threatened when pain made progress feel impossible. "You saved my life," she reminded him during a particularly difficult session. "Twice. Once from the fire, once from Lucas. The least I can do is help you recover." "You've already done more than enough." "No, I haven't even begun to do enough." She'd meant it. Clara had walked away from Aerotech, the company she'd built from the ground up, because staying felt like accepting the culture that had enabled Lucas's corruption. She'd taken her settlement, invested most of it in the Safe Flight Foundation, and started over. For someone who'd defined herself by her professional achievements, the identity crisis should have been devastating. Instead, Clara felt free for the first time in years. "I spent so long climbing," she told Ryan one evening as they worked on a small engine together, their hands moving in synchrony now, "that I forgot to look at what I was climbing toward or why it mattered. And now? Now I know it's not about how high you climb, it's about who you lift up along the way." Emma wandered over, covered in grease from helping Ryan with an oil change. "Miss Clara, can you help me with my homework?" "Of course. What subject?" "Essay about heroes. I'm writing about Dad, but I want to write about you too. Is that okay?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I'm not a hero, sweetheart." "Yes, you are. You stopped the bad guy, and you help kids learn to fly. That's hero stuff. Ryan smiled. She's got a point. I guess the student has become the teacher, Clara said, ruffling Emma's hair. They'd fallen into a rhythm. Clara came to the workshop every day, ostensibly to work on foundation business, but really to be near Ryan and Emma. They'd have breakfast together, work through the morning, take Emma to school, continue working through the afternoon, pick Emma up, make dinner together. It was domestic, ordinary. Everything Clara had once thought she was too ambitious for, and it was perfect. One Saturday, while building a model plane with Emma, Clara asked the question she'd been holding back. Ryan, what are we doing? I mean, we spend every day together. We're raising Emma together. We're building this foundation together, but we've never actually talked about what this is. Ryan set down his tools and looked at her seriously. What do you want it to be? I want it to be real. I want it to be permanent. I want to be Emma's mother, not just the lady who hangs around Dad's workshop. I want to wake up next to you every morning and go to sleep next to you every night. I want to build a life, not just a foundation. That's a lot of wants. Is it too much? Too fast? Ryan pulled a small box from his pocket. Actually, I was going to ask you the same thing. Different words maybe, but same idea. Clara stared at the ring inside. Simple, elegant, nothing like the flashy jewelry she used to wear. It was Sarah's, Ryan said quietly. She wanted Emma to have it someday, to give to someone who made her happy. Emma and I talked about it. She thinks her mom would want you to have it, if you'll take it. Are you asking me to marry you? I'm asking if you want to stay. Really stay. Not as a guest or a helper, but as family. As my wife, as Emma's mother. As my partner in all of this. Clara couldn't speak through the tears. She just nodded over and over as Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger. Emma cheered, running over to hug them both. Finally, I've been waiting forever for you to ask. How long have you known? Clara asked. Since the hospital, Emma replied matter-of-factly. You love each other. It's obvious. Adults are so slow about this stuff. And laughing through tears, surrounded by half-built models and blueprints and evidence of lives rebuilt from wreckage, they became a family. Officially. Finally. Forever. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the workshop windows. Clara brought pastries and coffee. Emma shouted joyfully, Miss Clara's here! Ryan fixed a wobbly chair. Clara laughed. Can you fix other people's hearts too? Only if they want me to. She was quiet for a long moment, then said, I used to think dating a mechanic was my biggest mistake. Now it's the luckiest thing that ever happened to me. He said softly, Because I saved you? No, because you saved me from my own arrogance. She took his hand. If you two still need me, I want to stay. He removed his late wife's necklace and placed it in her hand. Welcome home. Early morning light illuminated the wall, reflecting the childish writing. Safe flight, family. Clara said quietly, Family isn't where you're born. It's where you choose. And where you choose again, every single day. Ryan replied, And today, Daddy, I choose to stay. The wedding was small, held in the workshop, surrounded by aircraft parts and Emma's drawings. Just close friends, Emma as the flower girl, and vows they wrote themselves about second chance and choosing to love despite fear. Clara wore a simple dress, Ryan wore his best suit, the one he'd worn to their disastrous first date, now a symbol of how far they'd come. I promise to see you, Clara said during her vows. Not the mechanic or the ex-Navy engineer or the single dad, but you, the man who runs toward danger to save others. The father who teaches his daughter that kindness is strength. The hero who saved me from the flames and from myself. I promise to believe in you, Ryan replied. In your vision for the foundation, in your capacity for growth, in your love for Emma and me. I promise to be patient when you struggle, to celebrate when you soar, and to always, always trust that you're doing your best. They kissed as Emma cheered and their small gathering of friends applauded. The Safe Flight Foundation flourished. Within a year, they'd opened 3 learning centers. Within 2, they had partnerships with major aerospace companies who donated equipment and expertise. Within 3, They were a nationally recognized organization changing how young people, especially girls and minorities, accessed aviation careers. Clara testified before Congress about the importance of safety oversight in aerospace manufacturing. Ryan wrote technical manuals that made complex engineering accessible to students. Emma, now 11, gave speeches at fundraisers about what it meant to have a family built on second chances. One evening, as they prepared dinner together in the home they now shared, Emma asked, "Mom, do you ever think about what would have happened if that restaurant hadn't caught fire?" Clara exchanged a glance with Ryan. "Sometimes. Why?" "Because I think it was meant to happen. Like the universe knew you needed each other, and that was the only way to make you see it." "That's a very wise observation," Clara said. "I know." Ummais replied with characteristic confidence. "I get it from both my parents." After Emma went to bed, Ryan and Clara stood in the workshop, now transformed into a space that honored both his past with Sarah and their future together. Photos of Sarah hung alongside ones of their growing family. Emma's drawings covered the walls. Models they'd built together lined the shelves. "Do you think Sarah would approve?" Clara asked, something she'd wondered but never voiced. "I think she'd love you," Ryan said with certainty, "because you make Emma laugh, because you honor her memory by loving us well, because you turned one of the worst moments of my life into one of the best." "The date?" "The date," he confirmed. "If you hadn't been so terrible to me, I might not have stayed to see the storm. Might not have been there to pull you from the fire. Might have missed out on this entire beautiful mess we've built. So my arrogance saved us both? In a way, it brought us together, and that's all that matters." They stood in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other in the worst way and built something beautiful anyway. The workshop smelled of oil and coffee and possibility. The future stretched ahead, full of challenges and joys, failures and triumphs. But they'd face it together, as partners, as family, as proof that sometimes the worst first impressions lead to the best love stories. And every day, they chose each other again. That was the real miracle. Not the fire that brought them together, but the daily decision to stay, to build, to love despite fear and imperfection, and the knowledge that life could take everything away in an instant. They'd lost before. They knew the pain of absence. But they also knew the joy of presence, of choosing gratitude over grief, of building a family from fragments and determination. Emma's drawing said it best, safe flight family, because that's what they were. Not perfect, not traditional, but safe, flying together, and finally home. If you believe that healing stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe to Strong Dad Stories. We tell the stories that should never be forgotten.